Good afternoon and welcome to the Misano World Circuit. Marco Simoncelli for the next instalment of MotoGP, our final European round before we pack our bags and head east for 4 rounds in the Far East, and where we probably know there's going to be a MotoGP World Championship wrapped up. Of course, it won't be happening this weekend. After just 5 days ago, Alex Marquez denied brother Marc Marquez victory on home turf for the Catalan Grand Prix and denied him the opportunity to potentially wrap up the MotoGP World Championship points. The headlines coming into the weekend and certainly throughout the day tomorrow are going to be grabbed by Augusto Fernandez. The fact that he is debuting Yamaha's V4 powered M1, the first time that any of us will get to see this historic project in the flesh. There's a press conference that has unveiled the machine with Andrea Dovizioso and Augusto Fernandez, along with all of the key personnel behind the project for Yamaha. An incredibly exciting day for Yamaha, and although they haven't confirmed that they are going to race it next year, this just another step on the way to surely them debuting full-time this V4 in the 2026 World Championship, Lewis.
Yeah, you don't get this far into the project, this far into the development of it, unless you are fully intent on running it with all 4 bikes next season. Yeah, it's a bit of a milestone moment, isn't it? Because you can almost track this back to sort of mid-2022 when Fabio Quartararo started having the issues against all of the V4s. You could argue it cost him the 2022 World Championship up against Pecco Bagnaia. It's been a gradual decline for Yamaha, even allowing for some clear progress they've made this season, particularly over 1 lap. Fabio Quartararo continues to do unbelievable things with what feels like an outdated concept now, the inline 4. So they've decided, rather than the best way to beat them is to copy them, essentially, in terms of the concept of the bike. It is such a departure from anything that Yamaha have done before. So this project's really still in its infancy, but this is not, as you say, the first time we'll have seen this bike publicly, and I guess the first time we'll have seen it with a stopwatch.
And it was referenced in the press conference behind us that this project started pretty much right here 4 years ago. Of course, Fabio Quartararo won the 2021 World Championship right here at Misano, and even in that second half of the season you could feel there was a transition coming, and it was referenced there. MotoGP has changed hugely over the past 4 seasons, and it was at that point, once they won the World Championship, the greatest day for Yamaha over the past 4 or 5 years, that they understood that change had to come, and from then they've been working towards this project which debuts today. Now, we've not heard, well, we have heard from Fabio Quartararo, from Jack Miller, from Alex Rins, who all got the opportunity to try this V4 for the first time themselves on Monday in Barcelona, but for some reason, I can't particularly understand why, they've been banned from telling us what they make of it. But hopefully throughout the course of the weekend we'll be able to see at least some smiles from the likes of Augusto Fernandez to get his impression of the bike, because he's not going to be speaking to us either, so makes good fun for me in pit lane this weekend.
Well, Augusto Fernandez, of course, has been so integral, along with Andrea Dovizioso. They've done a lot of the donkey work, if you like, in terms of developing this motorcycle. Their feedback has been integral to the bike that you're going to see out on track tomorrow. So, yeah, across the next 4 days, I guess, we're going to see an awful lot of that M1 with the V4 engine in it, because of course Augusto Fernandez, as you said, will race it this weekend, and then the factory riders will test it here on Monday. Kiko Giles will be staying here. We'll be bringing you updates throughout the day on Monday to tell you how that test is going, not just generally, but the main focus is going to be Yamaha and the M1. And surely the decision has to be an easy one, unless it is so far off the pace that it's not worth racing early next year. They're going to be too far behind. Surely you've got to take that long-term view for next season, because surely the longer we go, the more likely a V4 is going to be the route that Yamaha go down. So ultimately now, if you're looking at next season, what long-term benefits are there from running an inline 4 if you know you're going to be moving away from it eventually?
I think that the key thing to show that Yamaha have made a decision behind the scenes but won't tell us just yet is that there's been no mention of the fact that a 2026 inline 4 engine is under any kind of development. So if somebody decides that this V4 project isn't going to work going forward, then there's no plan B. They haven't been developing, they haven't been working on an inline 4 for next year, and they can't just plug and play the 2025 bike, because obviously under concessions they can still develop, they can still improve. So I think that right there is evidence enough that the V4 project is going to be the way forward for Yamaha this year. There is, as we've mentioned, a wild card here for Augusto Fernandez. He will be wild carding in Japan, and looks likely that there will be a 3rd wild card before the end of the season, either at Portimao or Valencia for Augusto Fernandez as well. But none of the full-time riders will be able to run it until the end of the season, because although under the concessions rules they can put the engine in there, as we've just seen with the bike in that Yamaha Hospitality, the aerodynamics package is very different, and they've already used up all of their homologations when it comes to aero. So that is the factor that's going to stop them from potentially Jack Miller, that was rumoured might be able to run it for a few rounds up until the end of the year to gather data. That unfortunately won't be the case. But this weekend comes on the back of, you felt, an important one for Yamaha, because I remember we were stood there in the Red Bull Ring paddock and we were speaking about the first half of the season for each factory, what their hopes are going to be going into the second half, and both of us stood there and said we had pretty big concerns that Yamaha could have their struggles in the second half of the season as maybe focus switches to the V4, and they were certainly proven to be right, because Austria and Hungary was the lowest moment of the season for Yamaha and for Fabio Quartararo in particular. But boy, did he turn it around in Barcelona when I don't think any of us expected it. In particular on Saturday, he just proved once again that he is one of the huge talents on this grid.
Yeah, one thing we were fearful of from Yamaha's point of view last weekend was the low grip levels around the Catalunya circuit. And don't get me wrong, a V4 engine will help with that, because it will use the rear tyre differently, perhaps give you a little bit more grip and a little bit more punch out of corners. But even when he qualified second, we weren't entirely sure he was going to stick around there, did we? We've seen already this season Quartararo qualify well and then hit reverse gear in the race itself. Did a superb job to stick around at the front, to stay with the Marquez brothers in the sprint. And of course, third became second when Alex crashed. And managed his tyre as well, you have to say, through the Sunday Grand Prix. Ended up saving some tyre behind Luca Marini and taking advantage in the latter stages to pinch that fifth place at the end. And ultimately, it's the brilliance of Fabio Quartararo, which I think is another huge factor as to why Yamaha have pushed the boat out so much for this V4 powered M1, because ultimately they need to prove to Fabio Quartararo that Yamaha are a factory worth sticking with for the long term beyond 2026.
I mean, quite simply, the big question to Paolo Pavesio is that bike in there going to be enough to keep hold of Fabio Quartararo in 2027? And that is the big question, because already...
They're probably going to need an answer to that before next season starts.
Absolutely. Already the sharks are starting to move in the waters. There's already talk of Honda being incredibly interested in Fabio Quartararo after their attempts to get Jorge Martin on board didn't succeed. So, yeah, they have to show at least something to Fabio. And it has to be something on track. For too long, there's been promises, there's been PDF documents that Fabio has spoken about that have said that right now it's not enough. I have to see something on the track, in the flesh, that can convince me to stay with Yamaha, because he's put so much into this project, and certainly over the past 4 seasons, he's not had a lot back.
And if you take Fabio Quartararo's results out of the equation for Yamaha, there's not an awful lot there, is there? Quartararo's taken their only pole positions, taken their only podiums this season. Of course, very nearly won the British Grand Prix. There have been 1 or 2 little shining moments from particular Jack Miller in qualifying, but ultimately it's Quartararo or bust for Yamaha at the moment, so they cannot in any circumstances afford to lose him, because he transforms Yamaha from quite comfortably the weakest manufacturer in terms of competitiveness in MotoGP to a factory that can challenge KTM, Aprilia, and on the right day, Ducati.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, let's hear from Fabio Quartararo speaking to us earlier today. We're going to hang around a little bit longer to see if we might be able to grab him live afterwards, but earlier today he caught up with Elliot Yorkin, our broadcaster set.
I chat a lot with Augusto about how the engine and the bike feels. So I think it will be important also on the communication between us and him. And of course, I'm really looking forward to see it on track with especially all the other riders.
I guess you'll be looking at a rider more closely than you would do normally with Augusto riding the new bike, which is going to have a lot of attention on it from everyone.
Yeah, of course, it will give attention to everybody, especially to us, because we know that it will be important to see in which position it is. Sorry, and especially what is his feeling on a different track than Barcelona. So yeah, I think it will be nice to see.
Do you feel like the direction now for Yamaha is clear for the future? It's all about the V4.
Yeah, I think was pretty clear even before to test. I mean, is really important for them to follow one direction, and I think that they are on it and they are working a lot.
So there we go, the thoughts of Fabio Quartararo ahead of this very exciting day tomorrow. There's going to be lots of cameras, there's going to be lots of journalists, me included, down there, trying to get that first glimpse of the V4 on track. But we'll stay here, as we say, and if any of you guys, because obviously it's over our shoulders, please shout and let us know if Fabio Quartararo or any of the Yamaha lads pop out behind us. But let's touch on what we saw last weekend. It was billed as Alex Marquez's to lose on Sunday, but all of us knew that in the back of his mind, in the back of all of our minds, was going to be that crash at turn 10. But wow, he had the weight of, sure, it felt like a country on his shoulders with Marc Marquez behind him for 90% of the race at just a quarter of a second. But Alex, he delivered, and with that, a huge result to, you'd imagine, cement himself as runner-up in this year's championship. Yeah,
as you say, it was Alex Marquez's to lose, and on Saturday he dutifully obliged, didn't he, with the crash at turn 1. He was going to win the sprint. Marc Marquez had already raised the white flag and given up and settled for second place before Alex, as he put it, got a little overconfident in such a strong position in the sprint. There was no way he was going to make that same mistake on the Sunday, even with Marc Marquez ultimately giving up in those latter stages. Just reward, I think, for Alex Marquez, because he's clearly riding as well as he ever has in his Grand Prix career, but for so many occasions this season, he's had that pesky older brother who's just been that little bit better. Marc Marquez said, and this is the ultimate compliment you can give to Alex Marquez, Marc said, I rode the perfect race and it still wasn't good enough. So Alex Marquez just simply too good, too fast, too good on his tyres on that particular weekend. And you feel that that was one of maybe 2 venues this season that we still have to go. Sepang arguably being the other, where Alex Marquez is so good, where he would have a real opportunity to beat Marc Marquez head-to-head on equal terms. And of course, by doing that, he's ensured, as you said at the top of the show, that the championship can't be decided here. Huge confidence boost for Alex. It was a huge confidence boost for Enea Bastianini, who joins the pair on the podium. Marco Bezzecchi, we're going to hear from shortly, returns to home soil, a place where both he and Aprilia have been successful before. I know that that's the first loss that Marc Marquez has had in 16 races. A 15-race streak comes to an end, and it wasn't bad. He finished second, but do we come here thinking that he could be under pressure yet again? Or are we looking at his record around this Misano circuit and thinking he's going to be red-hot favourite, it's going to take something extraordinary to stop him? He's going to be red-hot favourite. 5 MotoGP victories around here, although at least 3 of those have been affected in some way by rain. Flag-to-flag in 2015, underwater 2017, and of course last year the drama of the flag-to-flag when Jorge Martin got it spectacularly wrong at the start of the Grand Prix and came in for a bike change that he instantly regretted. But Marc Marquez has been strong on just about any circuit we've been to so far this season. I guess the question that many might be asking coming here is, what about Pecco Bagnaia? Of course, so good over the years around this circuit. The VR46 Academy riders, of course Bez is one of those 2, we'll hear from him shortly, know this circuit like the back of their hands, and there have been some warm words exchanged between the factory Ducati teammates, where far be it from me to suggest that Marc is trying to help Pecco Bagnaia, but clearly there have been some words between 2 world champions and Marc trying to, I guess, remind Pecco Bagnaia of just who and what he is. Yeah, we're going to hear from both Marc and Pecco later in the show once we've had the chance to speak live with Marco Bezzecchi. Those quotes coming from one of Ducati, their own behind-the-scenes video that they do every weekend, and it was quite telling, really. I mean, it showed you the state of which that factory Ducati garage is at the moment. That Pecco was almost turning to Marc for some kind of help and support and assistance. And at the start of the year, I don't think very few thought that we'd be in a position where that was unfolding. And it says a lot about the psyche, I guess, and Pecco Bagnaia, he's a proud man. Clearly all world champions are, but he's not too proud to ask one of the greatest riders, if not the greatest of all time, for some tips and for some help. Of course, Pecco Bagnaia has been the reference for so long from a Ducati point of view. He is no longer that. The weekend until the Sunday in Montmello looked like being the worst of his MotoGP career. You may argue it still was, even though he did recover to 7th in the Grand Prix itself. I don't think on any world, in any scenario, could you imagine Pecco Bagnaia at Misano being so weak. Fabio Quartararo behind us. Let's see if we can grab a very quick word before he shoots off. This is going to be difficult, but I'm going to try, as always. Fabio, just before you go, we're live. Exciting weekend. Are you as excited as all of us to see that V4 on track?
Yes, of course. Hopefully it's fast.
There we go. That's all we need to know. I'm sure he does, and I'm sure that there's plenty of people in there as well. Well, I said I'd try my best. At least we got something out of him. Right, let's head down to Aprilia, shall we, and hear from Marco Bezzecchi. I'm hoping to get slightly more words out of him than I did out of Fabio. let's switch our attention to Aprilia off the back of Pecco Bagnaia's frustration. You almost feel it's the polar opposite for Bez. Yes, Barcelona was a pretty disastrous weekend, but for the most part, through no fault of his own. He was taken out on Saturday. It was a tiny, tiny error that had big consequences on the Sunday, and that brings to an end for Bez a run of results where, behind Marc, he's been the form man of the championship.
Yeah, the two riders who've been giving the Marquez brothers the greatest challenge in recent times have been Pedro Costa from KTM and Marco Bezzecchi from Aprilia. And yeah, as you say, I think Marco Bezzecchi may be applying a keep your distance sticker onto his motorcycle this weekend, because as you say, it was VR4060 Ducatis that were generally getting in his way or taking him out last weekend in Barcelona. Yeah, we went to Barcelona with quite high expectations of Aprilia because of their previous record. I did ask Marco about that on the Friday, and he said, in fairness, Aleix Espargaro, who had much of the success from an Aprilia point of view in Barcelona, has quite an old school, quite a unique riding style that just doesn't really apply to Bez, so he was never really in any kind of position to replicate that. But a weekend ultimately where just luck wasn't on his side. It is just as simple as that. Marco Bezzecchi had no luck at all, neither on the Saturday nor on the Sunday. Of course, penalties were handed out to Frankie Morbidelli as a result of what we saw, and of course Fabian Aldeguer as well, who took him out in the race. But that doesn't, of course, bring anything back to Marco Bezzecchi, a weekend that I think he'll be keen to consign to history. As mentioned, just no luck at all.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure that he'll be hoping to bounce back this weekend, and no better place to bounce back than on home turf. Marco, good afternoon. How are you?
I'm okay. And you?
Yeah, I'm very good, thank you. I have to say, I'm loving the special cap for the weekend. You're looking good in purple.
Thank you. Thank you. I like it as well.
And just before we get going, you sat on not a bad-looking machine. What is this that you're on here?
This is the new RSV4X. So it's a very limited bike that Aprilia presented in Montmeló last weekend. So it's really comfortable and also really cool to watch, so why not to sit here during the interview?
There we go, we've got the sales pitch done. Good man. At least when MotoGP comes to an end, you can become a motorcycle salesman. Excellent job. Let's touch on this weekend. We were just saying, what better venue after, I'm sure, a frustrating weekend in Barcelona to come on home soil. Lots of friends, lots of family. I'm sure you are raring to go.
Yeah, I'm really happy to be here in Misano, especially because coming from a difficult race weekend to have immediately another race weekend is always positive, and being here even more. So yeah, happy to be riding tomorrow in this track, and can't wait, honestly, to jump on the bike.
Looking at the recent progress, of course, there's been a clear step forward. You, along with, I guess, Pedro, have been the main competitors to Marc and Alex recently. Where do you still need to make that next step? What are the areas where both yourself and Aprilia still need to make that extra progress to be able to challenge them more consistently?
Well, I think we made a very good step compared to the beginning of the year. Obviously, we've been working really hard on the bike through every weekend, so we improved, but still, at the end of the races, I'm still missing something. So every time I need to do something more, and I think that together with the engineer, we can continue working and continue to improve. So the first target for me is try to bounce back after the difficult weekend in Montmeló.
And in terms of the general project, of course, having Jorge Martin back has, of course, injected some positivity, but of course, I guess it takes some of the slack off you as well. You've been doing so much work on and off the bike to try and drive the project forward. So how do you see the project ramping up? And I guess looking ahead to next year, what are the goals and what progress do you see being made?
Yeah, having Jorge back is really cool. First of all, for him, because I see that he's happy now, and it's always difficult to see the riders when they suffer, because being a rider, you understand what they feel. So yeah, happy to see him back, and also important to have his data, his feedbacks, not only for me but also for the engineers, but also for me as to try to make a comparison between myself and him, and yeah, very happy, and he's doing, I think, a great job, because he's missing a lot of kilometers on the bike. So everyone knows that he's super talented and he's super strong. So for sure he will continue in this way till the end, and he will show a lot of speed.
Coming into the year, Marco, you spoke a lot about how much pride it gave you to become a factory rider. Has it been everything you expected it to be?
Well, it's been tough sometimes, but also very beautiful. As I said, as you know, the beginning of the season was difficult, so was different from what I thought before starting the season. Of course, finding myself alone didn't help, but at the end, anyway, right now that we are two, the amount of job that we do during the weekend is always a lot. So I would say that everything is better than I expected, because I felt immediately fantastic with these people, with this team, with the factory in Noale, and also with the bike. At the end, my sensations since the beginning were positive. Of course, we needed to work on many aspects, but the first feedback that I received from the bike was good, so this was really positive, and this gave me the motivation to push myself through the limit every time.
And just finally, lots of fans at home love the special helmets we always get for home Grand Prix. Have we got one for this weekend? What can we be excited by it?
Yeah, I will have, of course, a special helmet as always. Saturday morning I will come out with the helmet. I have to say that I'm not sure that you will understand this,
okay,
but not because just because you are not Italian.
Okay.
And it's something that I think that here the Italian fans, the Italian people will recognize it well.
I'll wait for the explanation on Saturday then. I'll ahead of it, look up my pop culture Italian references to try get ready.
Okay.
Marco, great to see you. Have a great weekend. There we go. Great to chat with Marco Bezzecchi, looking good in purple and on that RSV4 X. Antonio Baselli there. I'm going to put my order in on Monday for that. Is that okay? Can I get my hands on one of them? It's perfect. 000. There's only 30 been produced, and I've just confirmed I'm getting one of them. I think he said free of charge, didn't he?
Yeah, that's a big vote of confidence to leave one of these to you, I think.
I know. He definitely said the word free, didn't he? I'm pretty sure of that.
Yeah, that's the only word.
I mean, exactly.
Freebie is concerned.
We'll take that. But yeah, big weekend for Bez, although he doesn't want to reference it, although Massimo Rivola doesn't want to reference it. I'm absolutely adamant. They're looking at the World Championship, and with Pecco Bagnaia having the struggles that he is, they're thinking, we have got such an opportunity in our first year on the bike to finish in the top 3 in the World Championship, which would be a remarkable result.
Yeah, given, as you say, Bez's first year as a factory rider, first year on an Aprilia, he's really risen to the challenge, hasn't he? No question about that. Essentially having to take the role of team leader, which I'm sure he wouldn't have gone into the season thinking he was going to play number 2 to Jorge Martin, but let's face it, Jorge Martin was the reigning world champion, so he's had to do a lot of work that at the start of the year he wouldn't have been expecting, certainly the volume of work that he's had to do this year, and he seems to have just taken it all in his stride. Of course, if you remember back to the start of the season, he couldn't really get a qualifying lap out of Aprilia, very quickly got on terms with that, and as soon as he did, we saw him as a regular podium threat. And as you say, that battle for 3rd in the World Championship, you could say there are as many as 4 or 5 riders who could still take that from the end of the season. Pecco Bagnaia, who is still in that 3rd place, but Bezzecchi could still chase him down. Pedro Acosta could potentially get involved in that battle too. The VR46 Ducatis aren't a million miles away from that themselves either. So if Bagnaia continues to struggle and doesn't find his old form again, then there are a number of riders chomping at his heels.
Yeah, as is always the case in MotoGP. You stand still for a second and there are people chomping at your ankles, but nobody has been able to get near to the ankles of Marc Marquez. I'm hoping we've got time to be able to hear from the man that won't be wrapping up the World Championship here, but certainly will inside the next month. He won't be in our press conference, so ahead of us handing over to the press conference, let's hear from the man leading the World Championship, the number 93, Marc Marquez. He spoke to us earlier, and here's what he had to say.
Of course, I was happy about Catalan GP, especially because, yeah, in the end was a difficult circuit for me, but we were the rider that scored more points on the weekend. It's true that was one rider faster than us, that was Alex, sprint and main race, but I was close to him. During the weekend I was closer and closer, and this makes me happy. And in the end we celebrate in a good way on Sunday, because it was a special day for our family. And part of that, now we are already in Misano, so yeah, a circuit that normally, I'm riding a bit better or switch better to my riding style than Catalonia.
Yeah, wins here in 2021 with Honda and 24 last year with Gresini, of course. Different wins, special in two different ways, I imagine.
Yeah. I mean, of course, last year was a very special victory. With Honda was a super special victory because it was already after the injury. And here with Gresini was a very emotional victory for the team. And we will try again this year to fight for it.
What's the mindset coming into these weekends now? Mark spoke to Alex, and it's almost a formality that you're going to win the title. He wants to delay it as much as possible. You want the best for Alex, but what's your mindset coming into every weekend now for the rest of the season?
I mean, mindset is try to keep the same mentality, even if remain 7 races to go, but I want to keep the same mentality because there's still a lot of races to finish the season. It's true that maybe we can close the championship earlier, maybe, but we will try to keep the same mentality because when finish 25, start 26 already straight away next day.
And we spoke to Pecco when we saw a conversation with you and Pecco in the car, in the Ducati insides, and he said it's important when someone like you speaks to him, you listen because of his struggles. Just talk to us about your perspective on Pecco and that conversation, offering advice. Obviously, you've been through difficult times as well, so you can probably understand where Pecco is coming from.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we're riders, and always you want to beat the teammate, and you want to beat everybody, even if it's your brother. But you don't want to see anybody that is suffering like Pecco right now. So yeah, I think that will be important for Ducati project that Pecco step by step come back to his level because it will be better for the testing, for develop the bike. And yeah, he has his team, he has his people around him that of course will give very good advice. But in the end, it's not easy for a rider when you are in a bad moment. And yeah, it's not easy, but it's even more difficult when every day you are in the journalist, always the same question, and yeah, difficult to forget. But he has enough talent to jump from that hole.
Yeah, it's always our fault, isn't it? It's always the journalist for asking the questions. But I have to say, you did feel sorry. I certainly did for Pecco Bagnaia. Speaking to him on Friday, speaking to him on Saturday, you're at a point where you think, what else do you ask here? Because you can see just how disconsolate he is. And from a human aspect, you don't want to push any further and you don't want to make him feel the emotions that he's already going through. You really did. Your heart went out for Pecco, certainly through the opening couple of days of Montmello. Right, before we head over to the press conference, Alex Marquez is going to be there. We've touched on him. Let's touch on Enea Bastianini because the beast is back, Lewis. A brilliant ride in Barcelona. It's taken some time, but things are starting to click for him and KTM, although not without its drama. Just 4 days on from getting on the podium for the very first time, he's had such a long-standing, loving relationship with Alberto Giribiola, who of course was crew chief to Andrea Dovizioso. We thought that was a partnership that would never end. Well, it has, unceremoniously, in the middle of the season. That comes as quite a surprise.
Yeah, ended at perhaps the most unexpected time, not just because it's mid-season, but because he's had his best result on board a KTM in the last week. But clearly there is, well, I guess we'll find out in this upcoming press conference, because I'm sure the question will be asked, truly what's gone on with Enea Bastianini. We can all make our guesses or our assumptions. But yeah, from Enea's point of view, he was the strongest KTM in the Grand Prix, and it wasn't even close. Pedro Acosta did admittedly take a gamble, which backfired spectacularly on the soft tyre. Might have finished fourth anyway, but certainly would have been a lot closer to the top three. And Bastianini arrives now at arguably his strongest circuit on the MotoGP calendar. Remember back in 2021 when he was on board the Vinci Ducati, he came from way back on the grid to get a couple of podium finishes. Of course, famously passing Fabio Quartararo 3 quarters before he won the World Championship. Nearly beat Pecco Bagnaia here the year after that too. So if you'd have thought on paper, all things being equal, if there was one circuit where you would watch out for the beast, it's this one, but he needs a new crew chief.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll find out tomorrow who's sat next to him. All signs are pointing towards the fact that Alberto Giribiola will be top-rack Razgatlioglu's brand new crew chief in Pramac Yamaha next year. What an exciting combination that is. And very quickly, the next man in the press conference, fresh from signing a new deal, Luca Marini, and he deserves to be in the press conference for us to be talking about him because over the past couple of weekends, he's been the standout Honda rider and has been quite comfortably challenging for top fives. He's been brilliant of late.
Best form of his Honda career so far, arguably the best form of his MotoGP career. As you say, strongest Honda, the new chassis amongst other things certainly has seen them take a huge step forward. So reason for him to be targeting the top 10 again here.
Absolutely, on home soil, of course, for Luca Marini too. Right, let's hand over to those three in the press conference and kick off this. The San Marino Grand Prix. Matt Burt, of course, hosting as usual, and he's joined on stage by Alex Marquez, Enea Bastianini and Luca Marini.